Hey, Mr. Valentine.
Hello, Jordan. How are you?
Are you aware of what day it is, Mr. Valentine?
Yes, it's Valentine's Day.
Right! Right. Well, at least it's a day or two before Valentine's Day. So, what are you doing for Valentine's Day, Mr. Valentine?
Being alone, like most people are.
Well, I'm going to be reviewing Crimson Peak. That's what I'm going to do.
I thought you hated Crimson Peak.
I do hate Crimson Peak. The movie pisses me off.
You're strange.
You're strange.
Oh.
Oh. Greetings, my grim little gothic ghosts, and welcome back to the basement, where love is always in the air. You know what I was excited for when it was first announced? Crimson Peak. You know, Crimson Peak, the 2015 gothic horror romance ghost film from acclaimed director Guillermo del Toro with that crazy big spooky black mansion in it. Yeah, I was excited for that thing. Not only because I love Guillermo del Toro and movies with big spooky black mansions in them, but also because in the official trailer for Crimson Peak, I saw the words, "From the imagination of director Guillermo del Toro comes his ultimate masterpiece." Really? Really? His ultimate masterpiece? Yeah, I think that was Pan's Labyrinth. Pan's Labyrinth was his ultimate masterpiece, I'm gonna say, not Crimson Peak.
Thomas, come quick! A woman in the corridor there!
If ever there was a movie I could call such a missed opportunity, such a painfully missed opportunity it actually physically hurt me on the inside, it would have to be Del Toro's Crimson Peak. You know what I disliked about Crimson Peak? Fucking everything! Nah, I'm just kidding. There were plenty of things I enjoyed about this film. The cast was great, the atmosphere was great, the costumes were great, the sets were great, that beautiful gigantic mansion was sublime, and overall it was maybe one of the prettiest looking movies I've ever seen in my life. But see, that's the thing. I feel like if you stripped Crimson Peak of its money, of its gorgeous CGI, its expensive costumes, and its lavish grand sets, it would be so bland, so lame. And yes, I know it obviously took a lot of work to make those sets. After all, this kind of beauty in a film doesn't just come from money. It does come from creativity, from vision and effort. And Guillermo del Toro definitely has his head right in the game when it comes to amazing cinematography and outstanding visuals. But my problems with the film lie more in the writing, the dialogue, the characters, and the way the story plays out.
What did you say?
Crimson Peak.
There was just so much Crimson Peak could have been. It could have been a good ghost movie. It could have been a moving romance. It could have been a stirring drama, or maybe, you know, a terrifying horror film, which is what the trailers tried to make it look like. And you know, maybe I'm just disappointed because my expectations are way too high for Guillermo del Toro. I mean, I'm a huge fan of this director, for more reasons than just Pan's Labyrinth. Pan's Labyrinth is one of my favorite modern films of all time, and believe me when I say I do consider it a masterpiece. But a lot of del Toro's other films are cool too. Hellboy, for instance, is a deliciously dark superhero movie. It's got action, it's got heart, it's got comedy, it's got spectacular visuals, marvelous monsters, and Hellboy 2 is even better.
So child, make the choice. The world or him.
Believe it or not, del Toro even directed another ghost movie. It was called The Devil's Backbone, and even that was pretty decent. It had an intriguing, emotional story, and even a couple scares that did hit the mark.
¿Ves aquí abajo?
If there's one thing I love about Guillermo del Toro as a director, it's that he puts his personality into his movies. He's a director who always has an idea for what he's doing, and a strong personal touch. Even if he makes a movie that turns out poor, or just flat out terrible, chances are it'll still feel unique. It'll feel Del Toro, and there'll always be passion involved. Like, he never makes movies that feel empty and devoid of life, is what I'm saying. Not even Crimson Peak. But Crimson Peak still pisses me off. So I'm gonna talk about it.
Ghosts are real. This much I know.
So for those of you who don't know, Crimson Peak follows the story of a young woman named Edith, played by Mia Wasikowska, who meets and falls in love with a man named Sir Thomas, played by Tom Hiddleston.
I've always closed my eyes to things that make me uncomfortable. It makes everything easier.
I don't want to close my eyes.
Edith is a confident young writer living in America who's trying to get her manuscript published. But after her father mysteriously dies out of nowhere, she decides to marry Sir Thomas and goes to live with him at his mansion, Allerdale Hall, which sits atop a dilapidated red clay mine, also known as Crimson Peak. And then there's ghosts. Now, right off the bat, a lot of people were disappointed when they went to go see this movie, because they were expecting it to be a horror film. And it's not a horror film. It turns out Crimson Peak is much more of a tragic romance than it is a horror, and there's hardly anything that scary or hair-raising that happens in it. But hey, I'll admit it, the best portion of the movie is probably the beginning. The first 30 minutes, when it's not trying to be all spooky and horrific.
No, she's not coming. Stubborn to the bone. Where did she get that from? I'm not complaining. I like it.
Crimson Peak sets the scene really well for an early 1900s romance. The soft colors, the classic charm, and the smooth, stainless old Hollywood-styled filmmaking are impeccably pulled off, and perfectly immersive as a result. Del Toro's backgrounds play a big role in this, obviously. The rooms and the scenery are always eye-catching and different. They look like they're straight out of a fairy tale. And when our characters leave America and finally get to the big mansion, it just gets prettier and prettier. But then, of course, the horror starts to kick in. Everything considered, the fact that Crimson Peak is a romance and not a horror movie is actually a problem. Because not only do the trailers make it look like a horror movie, which automatically leads to a lot of doomed expectations, but the whole thing itself acts like a horror movie. Like, there's a scene early on where Edith meets Sir Thomas's sister, Lady Lucille, and they start talking about how cruel the world is. And then, this shit happens. Now that's terrifying. And you'd think, by the scene, the movie must be building up to something really damn disturbing. This keeps happening throughout the entire thing, too. The movie is full of jump scares. It's full of atmosphere and tension building. The whole film acts like a horror, not really like a romance. The romance isn't even much of a thing, in my opinion. It'd be one thing if the relationship between Edith and Thomas were believable or endearing, or had inspired original dialogue that built it up well, but in my opinion, personally, it just never amounts to anything.
Why did I bring you here? Who did you marry? A failure.
Don't say that. You're all that I have.
What do you think about love, Mr. Valentine?
Nothing.
What do you mean, nothing? You have to think something.
Love is a waste of time.
Well, you aren't very optimistic.
10 in every 10 relationships end in flames. Monkeys are not capable of love.
Did you just call me a monkey?
You are a monkey.
I am not a monkey!
Monkey.
Shut up! So yeah, the romance kinda sucks. Most of their dialogue is just exposition. They explain things to each other, they make remarks about facts, about the past, about the mansion and what's going on, but they never seem to study themselves or bond or go through any kind of legitimate character arcs aside from, I love you, Edith.
My heart would cease to beat and I would die.
Like, this is literally what happens for them to fall in love. They meet each other, they like the way they look, they have a dance together, and yeah, I think that's it. That's the point where they fall in love. But I'll talk more about why the romance doesn't work later. First, let's get back to the horror. Like I said, the movie keeps building up the horror, pretty much every minute of screen time. At the beginning, Edith sees a ghost, who's supposed to be her dead mother.
My child, when the time comes, beware of Crimson Peak.
Throughout the rest of the movie, she keeps seeing ghosts. All of these ghost encounters involve 1, Edith walking down a dark hallway in the middle of the night, 2, a ghost appearing, and 3, Edith freaking out and running away. That's all that happens, every single time. Now, honestly, I actually like these scenes. I like the ghosts. I think they look awesome. Just as awesome as any intricate dark monstrosity Guillermo del Toro's put together. And I can tell these scenes took a lot of time and effort to shoot. But the problem with them is, not only do I think they aren't scary, but they make me laugh. I'm sorry, I just can't watch these scenes without laughing. I break out laughing almost every time I see them. Is that weird that I can say I like these ghosts? I like these scenes, but they're hilarious and not scary? I mean, that's just how I feel. I don't know why I find them so funny. Maybe it has something to do with how the ghosts talk every time they're on screen. In some ways, I guess it sorta works, since the ghosts aren't even supposed to be real.
Your father didn't tell me it was a ghost story.
Oh, it's not. The ghost is just a metaphor.
So there's your blanket statement for the whole movie. The ghosts are just a metaphor.
YouTube's just a metaphor. Deep. I know.
But that doesn't change anything. That doesn't change the fact that you've built these ghosts up. You've built them up hardcore. And the payoff isn't scary. I mean, fuck, there are a billion things built up throughout this movie. And it seems like none of them ever pay off. Like, remember how I said the mansion is supposed to be sitting on top of a gigantic clay mine? Well, at the start of the movie, it's revealed the mansion is falling apart. And it's actually supposed to be slowly sinking into the red clay.
The wood is rotting, and the house is sinking.
Well, that's a cool idea. What do you think they do with it? Spoiler alert, nothing. They do absolutely nothing. How cool would it have been if the mansion fell apart and collapsed at the end? What if the climax of the movie all took place in a sinking house? Its walls and floors breaking apart as our characters run for their lives, trying to escape from, I don't know, caving into the ground. Yeah, I wish.
But guess what it does all build up to? Guess what the climax of this movie is? I'm gonna tell you. I'm gonna tell you what all these ghosts and all these metaphors and all these big epic sets result to in the end. Are you ready?
A knife fight between 2 women. That probably sounded a little sexist. I promise I would have been just as disappointed if it were a knife fight between 2 men.
I won't stop until you kill me, or I kill you.
So at the end of Crimson Peak, Edith is led by a ghost to Lady Lucille's room in the middle of the night. And it turns out, dun dun dun, Sir Thomas is in love with his sister. They're having sex. And he and Lady Lucille have actually been poisoning our main character all throughout the story, planning to kill her in the end and inherit her fortune so they can have more money. They also killed her dad. Okay, so, for one thing, this completely ruins the romance of the movie. It's not very romantic. I mean, seriously, how am I supposed to get behind a romance where the dude is secretly having sex with his sister and planning to kill the main character? That's not romantic. That's not romantic at all. And I don't care if he's like, oh, Edith, I'm sorry for what I did. I'm on your side now and I've changed my mind. That doesn't matter. That doesn't change anything. The dynamic sucks.
You told me you love me.
I do. Edith, please. Please trust me one more time.
Hey, Mr. Valentine, do you think I'll ever get married? What? Do you think I'll ever get married? Why are you asking me this? Because you're Mr. Valentine. I want your advice. Why would you want to get married? Because! Someday I want someone to belong to me. Belong to you? What a childly possessive idea. What's wrong with you? The demand to be loved is the greatest of all arrogant presumptions. What are you talking about? If you really loved someone, why would you demand they belong to you? Wouldn't you just love them for who they are? Allow them to be self-fulfilled and independently happy? I don't like talking to you.
Oh, and not only is the shitty romance ruined by the end of the movie, Everything else is pretty much ruined too. I'm actually surprised Chris Stuckman, famed YouTube reviewer, said he liked the last 15 minutes of Crimson Peak more than anything else in the film.
The last 15 minutes of this movie are great. They're what I wanted the whole movie to be like. The last 15 minutes are intense and exciting and gory, and I was like, wow, this is what Crimson Peak should have been like, the last 15 minutes.
Now, no disrespect to Chris Stuckman. I love that guy, and I'm all for heavily differing opinions on things. But I couldn't disagree with him harder on this. The last 15 minutes of Crimson Peak are the worst parts ever, in my opinion. The knife fight at the end is horrible. Horrible because it's not thrilling because it's hilarious. That is literally the climax right there. She gets hit in the face with a shovel. I was laughing so hard when I watched that for the first time.
I won't stop until you kill me, or I kill you.
And there's nothing else to it after that. See, I feel like this movie was trying to follow in the footsteps of The Shining or something. Like, it was building itself up with a lot of ghosts, a lot of spooky spookiness, a gargantuan mansion, and in the end, the horror just erupted from a human being who'd been there all along.
I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains in. I'm gonna bash them right the fuck in.
But see, in The Shining, that person was Jack Nicholson, and his character was scary. He was intimidating. In Crimson Peak, Lady Lucille is not intimidating, in my opinion. Not only can you tell this chick is gonna be the villain from the very first second you hear her talk, but she's not crazy enough. I feel like if the villain is gonna be a person with a knife, it should be a more frightening, crazy, and unpredictable person with a knife. Oh, and speaking of knife fights, here's another thing. Every scene involving knives in this movie is awful and dumb. Like, at one point there's this guy that comes to rescue Edith. Like, he comes to the mansion, takes Edith with him, and tells Thomas and Lucille he knows they're both murderers. He's like standing right in front of them saying, I know you're evil. You're both murderers. You're evil, and I'm gonna take Edith away from this place. Then they start to walk away slowly towards the front door. Oh my! She stabbed you with a knife! Who could have possibly seen that coming? It's not like you were just standing there in front of two psychopath murderers, telling them they're psychopath murderers and that you're going to slowly and calmly leave their house. God. And there are other scenes like this too. Like, there's a scene where Lady Lucille sits Edith down and tells her to sign her name.
What are you waiting for? You have nothing to live for now.
Sign your bloody name!
And Edith, she's not like tied to the chair. She's not chained down or restrained in any way. And she's surrounded by sharp objects that she could easily stab her with. So what of course happens? Oh no! She stabbed you with a pen! Who could have possibly seen that coming? God. Crimson Peak. This movie's pretty. Yes, it's pretty. Pretty. I could watch it 1,000 times for how pretty it is. But the story sucks. Sadly. The end.
God damn it. Why is Valentine's Day so lonely?
Because it's meant to be lonely. Every day is lonely.
Stop talking.
Every day is lonely and you are always lonely.
You know what, Mr. Valentine? Shut up! Shut up before I kill you!
Kill me and Valentine's Day will never come again.
I don't care! I'm sick of Valentine's Day! I'll never have anyone! I'll never be in love.
Look, Jordan, listen to me now. You don't need to have someone to be in love. Instead, why don't you just love?
What do you mean, love?
Love anything. Love everything you love. Life is remarkably short, Jordan. You're going to die. Everyone's going to die. If you're going to love something, you might as well just love it. Love it forever, regardless of whether or not it loves you back.
You're right. You're right, Mr. Valentine. You're right. But I'm gonna throw you against the wall now.
No.